This is the title of my project, my capstone, The State of Queer Inclusive Art Education, Narrative Inquiry into Texas's Discriminatory Education Legislation. A mouthful indeed. American schools today can be defined as predominantly heteronormative and hostile climates, let me take this off, for queer youth. The Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network, GLSEN, has been documenting queer youth's experiences since 1999 in their National School Climate Survey. The 2019 report reflects that the majority of queer youth still feel unsafe at school because of their sexual orientations and gender identities. They report having lower self-esteem and exhibit lower GPAs and higher truancy rates. They experience discriminatory school policies and receive limited or no curricular representation of the LGBTQIA+ community and or its concerns. However, the report also shows that when permitted, queer youth do benefit from an inclusive and supportive school staff, policy, and curriculum. But none of this surprises me, for I once was a queer youth. And although I lived many of those negative experiences firsthand, I had one incredible sanctuary and outlet that allowed me an escape from negative thought and permitted me to feel content with myself. Art class. Since the 90s, scholars in the field of art education have believed the discipline to be beneficial for queer youth who are coming to terms with their identities, and may even imprint notions of empathy and understanding within their non-queer peers. Fowler noted the discipline's ability to promote divergent thinking and an openness to others through multi- and transcultural awareness. Goudet believed art teachers to create conditions through which youth experience the pleasures and responsibilities of democracy, and that art making may provide youth a positive sense of self through identity-affirming projects. Many claim that the curricular inclusion of queer relationships, imagery, and artists may provide queer youth with successful role models while developing positive attitudes about queer people in all youth. And since students may be turned off by a curriculum that doesn't reflect their lived experiences, Lampella argued that we owe it to our students to address lesbian and gay issues in school in professional and educated ways, thereby providing them with a complete education. But again, through my own experience as a queer visual arts student, I already knew all of this to be true. What I didn't know, however, is what it's like to be queer and an art teacher. Historically, American educators have long been held to an exemplar where traditional sexual and gender identities have stemmed from and been championed by a puritanical and white ideal, making these traditional identities paramount to maintaining a career in the field. Queer teachers have worked through anti-gay political campaigns and have risked losing their jobs and teaching certifications. Such hostile exclusion sends a message that there must be a detachment between their personal, sexual, and gender identities and their teacher identities. A 2018 study found that the fear of a conservative administration and community has been found to keep a majority of queer teachers in the closet, with many of them donning an illusion of heteronormativity in their workplaces. And then there's this. Last month, Florida passed its Don't Say Gay bill, restricting discussions of gender and sexuality in their K-12 curriculums. But sadly, this is nothing new. Currently, Louisiana, Mississippi, Oklahoma, and Texas have similar laws. But Texas's has a much worse. Nickname. Officially enacted in 1991, Texas's No Promo Homo law restricts and prohibits school-based instruction that could be construed as a positive portrayal or promotion of homosexuality. And while most of these laws are directed specifically at health education, Texas's law is the only one that prohibits these concerns in general education as well. And therefore, the art room is where I'm taking this. Citing the anti-sodomy law for its reasoning, the law reads that homosexual conduct is not an acceptable lifestyle and is a criminal offense, even though the anti-sodomy law was overruled in 2003, which was not that long ago. So what does this mean for me as a gay pre-service art teacher who wants to promote equity, diversity, and inclusion in their future art room? Is living authentically and openly considered an illegal positive portrayal? To find out, I wanted to know, how may the no promo homo law affect the professional and personal experiences of queer-identifying Texan art educators, as well as their views on a queer-inclusive art curriculum, and impose upon one for their students? I've conducted my capstone through the lens of queer theory, which critiques what is commonly considered to be essentialist views of sexuality and gender. For queer theory celebrates transgression in the form of difference from norms, which are then exposed to be just that, norms, not natures or inevitabilities. And to best answer my central research question, I chose to interview queer-identifying Texan art educators with the methodology of narrative inquiry, or the study of how humans experience the world while educating those around them through the sharing of personal and social stories. And how could I do so in a way that may inform and better prepare other queer-identifying pre-service art educators who may be unaware of the law's existence? Thus, the tentatively titled Queer in the Heart of Texas podcast was born. Comprising of 7 episodes, each with their own theme. Episode 1 is an introduction to myself and the project. Episode 2 contains a Q&A with representatives from 2 LGBTQIA advocacy organizations, GLSEN and Equality Texas. And here is a little bit of extra info on the law that I gathered from my new friend Rachel at Equality Texas.
A lot of teachers don't know it's there because it's buried in the health and safety code and not actually in the education code. I don't think administrators know either. It applies whenever you're talking about anything that can touch on health and safety, like social emotional learning and healing. I think it was passed as political theater, but it just kind of faded into obscurity. There's no enforcement agency roaming around looking to see what teachers say. But we're seeing more anti-LGBT groups of parents and activists starting to take that enforcement into their own hands. There was a group in the DFW area that emailed all of the teachers and said, if we're being required to comply with predatory gender fluidity policies, which is just affirming trans kids, give us a tip on this hotline. And a lot of teachers.
Nope.
And a lot of teachers.
There we go. Episode 3 introduces the queer-identifying Texan art educators interviewed. There are 5 in total with various identities and from different parts of the state. 3 identify as white, while 2 identify as Hispanic. 3 identify as female lesbians, 1 identifies as a gay male, and 1 identifies as a bisexual female. 2 live and teach in Houston suburbs, 1 lives and teaches in Austin, 1 lives and taught in Austin, and 1 lives and teaches in a rural suburb of Fort Worth. And together, their teaching experience ranges from 5 to 19 years. 4 admit to being fully out with colleagues and students, while 1 shares their sexuality on a need-to-know basis. Only 3 were familiar with the no promo homo law, and only 1 claimed to experience no struggles whatsoever as a queer art educator. All 5 participated in or launched their school's Gender and Sexuality Alliance, or GSA, clubs. Episodes 4 and 5 cover their lived struggles, as represented here in this exhaustive yet incomplete list. But let's learn of a select few in their own words.
There are some schools that you absolutely don't talk about. It's like a new version of don't ask, don't tell.
A parent came for me and said I was sharing sexually explicit photos and promoting a gay agenda, to which I showed one slide of my wife and I in a Finding Dory and Nemo costume at Halloween.
Then she found out, and her son was pulled from my class.
We do have a clause in our contract, so if a parent complains enough, and if that impedes the instruction in our classroom, we can get fired.
And you have that defensive role constantly. You're always worried about what they will find out, what's going to happen to me.
I have no faith in my school district to support me at all.
Every other teacher has their spouse on their desk. How come I can't have mine on my desk?
Teachers have said things to me like, well, why don't you talk about this? Okay, well, as a gay teacher in Texas, that comes up as an agenda.
And he said, I can support your club, I cannot promote your club. To which I said to him, is that what you say to the football team?
They were very disturbed with their words that we were even promoting GSA on our campus.
And my principal goes, I need to stop doing this because your ideas are dangerous to our district and dangerous to our children.
Are people going to respond to me as an educator, or will my appearance affect how people view me? It's an anxiety for my child that in the education world, I just feel like sometimes I'm always still that bad kid.
And then to worry that I could possibly lose my job for expressing myself in a positive role, for being myself, that's just the cherry on the top of the cake.
The idea that an elementary gay teacher will say, I have a wife or I have a husband as a gay person scares us all shitless. And I'm probably going to get out of the profession this year. I can't live this way anymore. It's harmful to me to not feel safe every single day.
Sorry if that was a bit much.
There are some.
No. In episode 6, we hear them explain why they believe our education is significant, how their students are receptive to queer inclusivity in their art room, and that all 5 educators claim to implement queer inclusivity through a myriad of methods. Here are some.
I have a Gleason Safe Space poster.
I've got the non-binary flag, I've got the trans flag, I've got the pan flag, the bi flag, you name the flag.
Just visibility so that they know this space is safe. A survey that I send out the first day of school asks for the pronouns. I always follow up that question with, is it okay if I use your pronouns with teachers, administrators, your parents? Because a lot of times students won't be using it at home.
I have to make sure those kids know they are seen, that they are not invisible, that their labels are not invisible, that who they are, how they identify, how they believe, all of that is valued.
Trying to design a curriculum that had artists with disabilities, artists with mental health issues, artists with different colors, LGBTQ artists, instead of trying to stick with the dead white guys.
Both historical queer people in the art world as well as contemporary. It's important for my students to feel like there are people like them that are successful and have contributed to society, that they're not alone.
I'm not afraid to teach about LGBTQ art. I'm not afraid to show those artists or talk about them. And let's be honest, in the art world, there are a lot.
Our state critiques are very, very, very broad. If anybody ever questions why I'm including LGBTQ artists, or if I'm ever talking about me being a practicing LGBTQ artist, it fits my content.
My room is like a queer magnet. I have kids come in during all the lunches, during all the blocks. I'm not even their teacher. And I just can tell that they feel safe with me.
I have a zero tolerance policy in my class.
When you said that's gay, do you mean empowered, the strongest person you've ever known, resilient, lovely, and beautiful? Or were you trying to use that as a put down? Don't use a word that describes me to say something you don't mean. So let's fix our language on that.
Nope.
I have a,
Episode 7 asks my interviewees what they think it will take for Texas to repeal the law, as well as advice for queer and allied pre-service educators with aims similar to my own. As it turns out, there is no evidence to suggest that the no promo homo law negatively affects these educators directly, except for the mental harm it may cause from merely knowing it exists. Although two expressed navigating difficult relationships with their administrators and districts due to their sexual orientations or inclusive practices, ranging from receiving limited support of their GSA clubs to being put under investigation and an 8-month involuntary leave of absence for displaying a photograph of their partner to their students, not a single educator interviewed claimed to have ever had the law used against them. As one participant suggested, it's not the law itself, but the character of the law that is harmful and has been used against all but one of them to varying degrees. And while we do have legal protections to prevent us from being fired for being openly queer, we must prepare ourselves because ways can be found to get rid of us. But regardless of the law's presence, these educators not only believe in a queer inclusive art education, but actively implement one through small and grand gestures to a mixed, yet mostly positive, reception from their students. In speaking with these 5 queer Texan art educators, I do feel that I have learned enough information to make my own informed decisions on how to proceed as I enter the field. Have I lost some of the original zeal I once had at the prospect of becoming an art educator? Maybe. Do I worry about maintaining a career in the field? Perhaps. But do I still wish to be a queer inclusive art educator? Most definitely. However, the biggest takeaway that I desire for my audience is this.
We have a teacher shortage. We have a crisis in this country, but you have so many amazing LGBTQ teachers. You have teachers of color. There are a lot of marginalized groups that don't come into the classroom because of what they have heard from other marginalized teachers who have left the teaching profession, and we have to change that narrative. Somebody coming into the classroom, being openly who they are, doesn't affect the quality of education that a child is getting. It's actually better than this. They're teaching those kids to be yourself, to believe in yourself, have confidence in the face of adversity. Those teachers are saying, here I am, this is me. Why is that bad to teach a kid to say, this is me, see me, I'm not invisible? You have to allow people to be themselves because we need good teachers, and there are good teachers who are afraid they will be treated the way they were treated when they were in the classroom. And that's something we have to talk about. It's a cycle we have to break. And no homo promo is not helping.
Thank you so much.